A lot of memorable events happened in Nigeria's economy in 2017. That year, Nigeria exited a protracted recession, the first in decades, that crippled the spending power of the masses as the cost of food items hit the roof, while many businesses picked up.
Now, more Nigerians lost their jobs and unemployment rate skyrocketed. This was coupled with a double-digit inflation that made an already bad situation even worse. Now, the scarcity of forex was another challenge that plagued Nigerians in 2017. But there were some positive events in the outgone year as well. Nigeria moved up in the ranking of the Ease of Doing Business Index, and the country also launched the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme, the one called VADES, aimed at capturing more persons into the tax window and blocking leakages.
Now, the economy is set to be on the path of recovery. But what could the government have done better or differently to achieve better results? Well, our guest should be answering that question and many other questions this morning. Abi Aida is an economist and he's here with us in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
And
Good morning.
very happy New Year to you.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Right.
Okay, so let's just do a quick, broad overview of how the economy performed in 2017. Where we got it wrong, what could have been done right, and then we can go on from there.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a tale of two economies. The one at the start of the year, which didn't really get going. Because I think the most significant event in the first half of the year was actually the absence of the president away on medical leave, and effectively that stopped business. And because the one thing, as we all know, is that we don't like uncertainty, and people were very worried. Investor sentiment was down, consumer confidence was down. There was a lot of uncertainty about our political leadership in terms of the risk that meant for the economy. So a lot of decisions were delayed, including the budget. And so decisions of particular significance were not made, and that is always a challenge, because what we like in the business environment is to be able to plan, and we need certainty. Once uncertainty is brought into the mix, then we delay decisions. Final investment decisions in various aspects are not taking. And so that really what characterized the early part of the year. So we continued with another 2 to 3 quarters of recession. And it's only in the third quarter of this year that there was finally an uptick. And at that point, people started to see light at the end of the tunnel. And so I would call it delayed optimism, because what you need to fuel the economy is optimism, and people were very wary and they weren't sure what direction we're going to go, because we have to try to recall just how uncertain things were. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew the state of health of our leader, and it impacted a lot of things. So really, that's what I would say. I would say an economy that we could have started earlier. We lost a lot of time once again, and so that's the way I like to characterize it.
Okay, Nigeria last year, 2017, a lot of like you said, uncertainty. But let's bring it down to the issue of the policies by the central bank. We had some improvement and commendation here and there, and then the IMF at that point said, well, Nigeria, you have to watch your borrowing. You have to watch this, you have to watch it, you have to watch it. And then we also saw them saying at the time that, well, Nigeria's, the economy is still very attractive to foreign investors and all of that. And then we also saw the CBN taking commendation for stabilizing the economy here and there.
I think the first significant event was when they opened an additional investors window for which was to the middle class, people who pay school fees, medical, things like that. That was in February. That actually happened in the absence of the president, so that was commendable. That's one of the things. And what that did, it was an effective devaluation, but it opened an additional window where people could access forex. You'll recall 2016, that was one of the major challenges, and it has ripple effects through the economy. We're an import-denominated economy, so therefore we pay very close attention to the exchange rate. And once that opened up, it attracted more flow for foreign direct investment, particularly portfolio investors. They started getting cautiously optimistic and started to come back in Our stock exchange is driven largely by them. Almost half the value of stock exchange transactions are from foreign portfolio investors. Once they started coming in, and you know capital is the best indicator of how the rest of the world views you. Once you get the capital flows going and they come back in, then really that tends to say you're on the right track. I'd rather pay attention to where the money is going than what the IMF is saying.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so now we've been told by the World Bank that the economy is still quite fragile. It's not necessarily uhuru yet. What are those indicators really that we should be looking at seriously to ensure that we're not as fragile as we're being told by the World Bank?
There are challenges, and quite a few of the challenges are usually hidden. You can't see them. I'll give you an example. The gridlock in Apapa. That is a significant impediment to doing business in this country. And it has ripple effects that are unquantifiable, but they are huge.
Yes.
Because it's like if you have a drain in your sink, if it gets clogged with hair, the water just doesn't flow as easily as it could. And that actually is a metaphor for the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
The fragility you're talking about comes from the fact that it's any shock to the system throws it off, and a lot of losses. The economy is not as resilient as it can be, and it reacts very badly to shocks. So even like the fuel shortage at the end of the year, it just doesn't take very much for any of those sort of events that are major in that respect to have a significant impact on business and in terms of what we're doing. And so therefore that is really the fragility, and that is, once again, it comes down to the confidence people have in the economy, and really, is it easy for us to do business? Is the economy strong enough to withstand all these shocks? And that's one of the big differences between us and the developed world. There's a lot more resilience built into the system because the processes and the systems are working as they should be. And when that is the case, then you have room to maneuver, and in fact, it's like having a backup generator.
Yeah,
So
but we're talking about the ease of doing business. You just painted a picture now. That sometimes we may not see it, but there's a lot of impact. Like you mentioned the Apapa gridlock now. In the same year that we had all of these challenges and all of that, accessing Forex and so on, Nigeria still moved up in the ranking in the ease of doing business.
that's because concrete steps are being taken in that regard. They're actually working at it, and I know there's the Presidential Council or something on that. And they're actually changing policy, they're changing regulations, trying to streamline things to make it a little easier to do business. That has an impact, because if I'm able to, my investment decision is driven by a lot of factors. One of it is that if there is a safer haven, so to speak, for my capital, I will go there. And it's not just safe for my capital, but I can also project. I can see what is going to happen. I can see how I can take my returns up, because I'm not investing at a charitable venture. And if you think about it like that, that's where all the other things now come into play, like the CBN move to open an investor window in April, and the convergence of the parallel and the official rate. That was a huge development in 2017 in terms of it brought a lot of stability, brought a lot of ability to plan, and it brought access. The parallel market, while very thin, it was a bit of a monster. It was actually leading the exchange rate.
Did we really have a convergence?
Availability usually indicates, if I call my parallel market dealer now, there's stability in the rate and there's not that move. There's not enough room for arbitrage again for me to say I'm going to be a Forex trader on the side, which is what a lot of people became, which is what happens when you have a 20% spread or whatever. That collapsed.
So initially when the CBN governor, or the CBN generally, started pumping in billions of dollars into the Forex markets to stabilize the national currency, the naira, a lot of questions were raised about the sustainability of that. But all through 2017, that intervention continued, and it's likely to continue again in 2018. Should the CBN continue that line of, that intervention, or is the naira strong enough? Is it stable enough for the CBN to say, okay, look, it's time for us to ease it a little bit?
Well, there were a couple of favorable developments for the CBN to be able to do that. One, they need the access to the dollars, and we were able, there's been very much less disruption in the Niger Delta, which meant we were able to boost our oil output from, I think, 1.55 to about 1.8 billion.
Yeah.
That extra 300,000 barrels a day is significant. And not just that, because of the things that there's relatively little disruption, you can now get the dollars in on a sustained and regular basis. With the foreign portfolio investors coming in as well, there was sustained inflow of dollars, and the CBN was able to maintain its intervention. And that is what is very important, because don't forget, all the speculative attacks in 2016 were because everybody was betting that the CBN could not maintain it. And they couldn't, and which was right, and which is why a lot of people made a lot of money, unfortunately, by betting that there would be a devaluation. Some people were very big on that, and that the CBN would not be able to hold out. And because of the recession, those dollars are not coming in. If those dollars aren't coming in, then they can't put the dollars into the market that is required. But what that did, and where it started to pay off in 2017, was because that a lot of the demand, underlying demand for Forex, was speculative. Our food bill was humongous, and it wasn't actually real. It was the way people were getting money out of the country. And because of they were able, that was almost eliminated, and the scarcity of the dollars and everything. So it's one of those indicators that whilst it seems in isolation, it has an impact on how we view other aspects of the economy. And
like
really,
inflation rate, for example?
Inflation rate is one of the things.
15% or so?
Inflation, but there was stability, and it came down. And predictability is what we look for. You know, if it is, I will now build my business and my economic activity around this inflation rate, whilst not ideal, as long as I can predict it and I don't end up in a Zimbabwe situation where it changes overnight. That is what we look for as investors and as business people. And when we say, don't forget, all of us are investors and business people.
All right.
And that's key.
Over the months now, the global crude oil prices have been significantly rising, and it's been sustained over some time now. And considering the fact that Nigeria imports oil, even though we are a producer of oil, but we import our oil, it means it's going to impact on the cost of oil too. Even though the government has said we are not going to increase the pump price of crude oil or fuel, but in the reality, if Nigeria doesn't increase the price of oil, it means maybe subsidy has to come in somewhere. Are we looking to the possibility of that somewhere?
Subsidy is back already. It's been back for a while. They've just changed the name. They're not calling it
what's
subsidy.
The name now?
They're calling it cost recovery by NNPC. If you notice, the vice president, I believe, said that it's actually costing NNPC and not the federal government.
Not the federal government.
So
exactly.
There you have it. It's play with the numbers. It's ultimately, I don't know if you saw the headlines from the Daily Times of 40 years ago or 45 years ago, where, I mean, serendipity is the same.
Yeah.
Our president, that was the petroleum minister. If I've been on this program before, and I've told you, if you do the same thing over and over again, you can't get a different result. It's not possible. The price of petrol will change. They may hold out as long as they can this year because of elections and because of the fear. It's a very important thing, but it is one of those we continue to kick the can down the road. At some point, somebody is going to have to make that decision that we have the distortions created by this sentiment of, if that's the only thing Nigerians are going to enjoy, let it be moderate. After all, it's our gift. You know the rest of the story. And ultimately, that is not a sustainable strategy, because it distorts the entire economy and we're not able to plan. The same sentiments were present about diesel. It's off the table now. Diesel finds its level and it's readily available. I mean, there may be spikes now and then, but the competition is fierce, and you call around. Before I get my diesel supplied at any of my businesses, I call 3 people. I have 3 suppliers, and whoever's most competitive that day with the delivery time, I do it, and that's how the economy functions.
Okay, fantastic. So now inflation rate is around 15.6 or thereabouts. The CBN says by the end of the first half of 2018, we may be looking at a high single digit. Is that realistic, really, with what's going on now? And our forex reserve, somewhere around $38 billion. Of course, CBN had predicted that by the end of 2017, we would be hovering around that. And the projection, you know, turned out to be a reality. So with the issues around oil price and all of that, and then subsidies is rearing its head again, is that likely to scrape off whatever gains we've made, especially when it concerns our forex reserve?
Well, if I can break it up into pieces, I think the first thing is, if you look at the oil price, is that it's beneficial and detrimental to us.
At the same time.
At the same time. And so what you're getting with one arm is going out the other way. And so whilst the oil prices bring in more revenue, there are also higher costs because of the fact that we import our petroleum-based products and because we're import-driven. So that is also a challenge. I'm less concerned, and I think the inflation targets is something they do. It's the multiple to the man on the street. All they recognize is that their costs are going up. The difference between a 15% inflation rate and a 9% inflation rate is not really tangible to the average consumer.
Okay.
It's not something you can physically, that I can tell now that the prices have only gone up by 9% as against 15%. All you're really internalizing is that the prices are continuing to go up. Because really, if we want to talk about a significant inflation rate, then really we're hoping for something like 2 or 3% developed country rates, so that is something that you know there's price stability and you can plan accordingly. So therefore, it's just something we need to look at, and those indicators, we watch them closely, especially those of us in the business. But for the average person, it's more about sentiment, optimism, how you actually feel. It's one of the leading poll questions is like, do you feel the economy or the country is heading in the right direction? That's actually a more important question to somebody, to the average person. If you have a sense it's not going in the right direction, that is where you have a challenge, and that is where your sentiment as a business person becomes, you know, you become more bearish about things. You're not as optimistic, and that drives consumer behavior, which drives how much demand there is for products, what people are producing. So all of those things are linked together. So overall, I would say cautious optimism for 2018. They are making the right noises about the infrastructure. But those of us who are close to the system, we also know that come June, July, we're done for the year. You know, we're politicking, we're done. So it's a half year.
Really
and that is actually very worrying. And you hope that they hit the ground running. So that is, but you see, it's part of the maturing process of as a country, where we can actually look at it and say, this is an election year. So therefore, we don't expect any, if you don't get your business done, especially if it's government linked by June or July, you're already toast. You can't see anybody again. You can't talk to them. And you know.
That is real.
So that is real. So this is a year where you have to move very quickly in terms of whatever it is you're trying to implement, whatever it is you want to do. Be aggressive and do it as quickly as possible.
All right, we have to leave it here now. Time wouldn't permit us to look at issues of the budget and the other issues, but however, we thank you for coming, Abi Aida, for coming on the program. Thank you.
For
Thank
having
you so
me.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.